"Get in," Jerome said without hesitation. The stranger was soaked, shivering, desperate. Rain poured down his face as he stumbled toward Jerome's beat-up Honda Civic. The man looked homeless, torn clothes, no coat, wild hair. I definitely couldn't pay for a ride to the airport. Jerome had $23 in his bank account. An eviction notice waited at home. His 8-year-old daughter needed medicine he couldn't afford, but the man needed help. Jerome didn't ask questions. He cranked up the heat, offered his spare jacket, started driving through the storm toward the airport, not knowing if he'd ever get paid. What Jerome didn't know: this stranger wasn't who he appeared to be. The truth about his passenger would shock an entire city. This one ride was about to change Jerome's life forever. The reward that followed would be beyond anything he could imagine. This is how one act of kindness created a miracle. But first, you need to understand just how desperate Jerome's situation had become. Jerome Washington's world had collapsed 2 years ago on a Tuesday night in October. The phone call came at 11:47 p.m. Sarah, his wife of 6 years, had been driving home from her book club when a drunk driver ran a red light. She was 7 months pregnant with their second child. Jerome lost everything that night: his wife, his unborn son, his future. Before the accident, life had been good. Jerome worked as a mechanical engineer at a Bay Area tech firm, earning $75,000 a year. Sarah taught 3rd grade. They owned a modest 3-bedroom house in Fremont with a white picket fence and dreams of expanding their family. Maya was only 6 when her mother died. For months, she'd wake up screaming, asking when Mommy was coming home. Jerome would hold her on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., both of them crying until exhaustion took over. The depression hit Jerome like a freight train. He couldn't focus at work, missed deadlines, made costly mistakes. His supervisor, once understanding, grew impatient. After 6 months of poor performance, Jerome was let go. The medical bills arrived like vultures: $47,000 for Sarah's emergency surgery and the attempts to save their baby. Insurance denied most claims, citing pre-existing complications they couldn't prove. Lawyers wanted retainer fees Jerome didn't have. To pay the bills, Jerome sold everything: the house, Sarah's car, her jewelry, her piano that she'd played every Sunday morning, the crib they'd bought for their son. Now Jerome and Maya lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in East Oakland's roughest neighborhood. Rent was $1,800 a month for a place with broken windows, no heat, and water stains on every ceiling. Maya slept in the bedroom while Jerome collapsed each night on a torn couch he'd found on Craigslist. Jerome worked 3 jobs to survive: rideshare driving from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., back out from 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. when Maya got out of school, food delivery from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. after putting Maya to bed. On weekends, he worked security at a warehouse, 18 to 20 hours a day, every day, for $150 if he was lucky. After gas, car maintenance, and app fees, Jerome barely cleared $80 on a good day. Maya ate 3 meals. Jerome ate 1. The Honda Civic was Jerome's lifeline and his curse. Inherited from his father, who'd died 5 years earlier, it was the only thing he owned outright. But the engine knocked like a broken drum. The check engine light had been on for 3 months. The brakes squealed. Every day, Jerome prayed it would make it through one more shift. Maya had asthma. Her inhaler cost $120 a month. Jerome had diabetes, diagnosed after the stress of losing Sarah. His insulin cost $180 a month when he could afford it. Most months he couldn't. Jerome would sit in his car between rides, dizzy from low blood sugar, hands shaking, wondering how much longer he could keep going. Maya had started saving pennies in a jar labeled "Daddy's Medicine Money" in her 8-year-old handwriting. It broke Jerome's heart every time he saw it. The worst part was Maya's questions. "Why don't we have toys like other kids? Why can't we go to McDonald's anymore? Daddy, why do you cry at night?" Jerome would hold her close and whisper, "Daddy's just tired, baby. Everything's going to be okay." But he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. Sarah's mother, Helen, was 73 and had early-stage Alzheimer's. She lived in a nursing home that cost $2,200 a month. Jerome had been paying for her care with credit cards and loans, but he was 3 months behind. The facility director called weekly, increasingly stern. If Jerome couldn't pay, Helen would be transferred to a county facility where the care was basic and the staff overwhelmed. Maya adored her grandmother. "When can we visit Grandma Helen?" she'd ask. Jerome would make excuses, unable to tell his daughter that he'd sold his wedding ring just to keep Helen in decent care for one more month. 3 weeks ago, Child Protective Services had knocked on Jerome's door. A neighbor had reported him for neglect because Maya was often alone while Jerome worked his evening shift. The social worker was kind but clear. One more complaint, and Maya could be removed from his custody. That night, Jerome made Maya memorize his sister's phone number in Texas. "If anything ever happens to Daddy, call Aunt Lisa. Can you remember that?" Maya nodded solemnly, not understanding why Daddy looked so scared. Jerome talked to Sarah's picture every night. It sat on his dashboard, the glass cracked from when he'd had to slam on the brakes to avoid an accident. "Sarah, I don't know how to do this without you," he'd whisper. "Maya wants to be a doctor like you dreamed of being. But I can't even afford her school lunch. She's hungry and I'm failing her. I'm failing you." Yesterday was the breaking point. Maya collapsed during dinner, gasping for air. Her inhaler was empty. Jerome had spent his last $12 on groceries instead of refilling her prescription. He carried her 6 blocks to the emergency room, running through the rain, begging God not to take the only family he had left. The ER doctor treated Maya, but handed Jerome a bill for $800 he couldn't pay. "Daddy," Maya had whispered from the hospital bed, "I'm sorry I got sick and cost money." Jerome wanted to disappear. Now, at 2 a.m. on this stormy night, Jerome sat in his car staring at his phone. Bank balance, $23. Maya's inhaler, empty. Eviction notice, final. He was 3 days from losing their apartment, one medical emergency from losing Maya. That's when he saw the desperate man in the rain. That's when everything changed with one desperate knock on his window. The storm hit Oakland like a biblical flood. Jerome watched through his cracked windshield as sheets of rain turned the streets into rivers. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, followed by thunder that shook his Honda's thin frame. Any sane driver would have gone home. The weather was dangerous. The roads were flooding. Jerome's windshield wipers barely worked, scraping across the glass with a grinding sound that made him wince. But sane drivers had money in the bank. Jerome had $23 and 3 days until eviction. He parked outside the Fairmont Hotel in downtown Oakland, watching wealthy guests dash from luxury cars to the lobby under oversized umbrellas. Their brief sprints from car to door probably cost more than Jerome made in a week. His phone buzzed with surge pricing notifications. The storm meant higher fares, but it also meant fewer drivers willing to work. Jerome could charge double, maybe triple his normal rates, if he could find passengers brave enough to venture out. The rain drummed against his roof like machine gun fire. Jerome rubbed his temples, fighting off the dizziness that came when his blood sugar dropped. He'd skipped dinner to save money for Maya's breakfast. That's when he saw the man. At first, Jerome thought it was debris blown by the wind, but as lightning illuminated the street, he realized it was a person stumbling down the sidewalk. No umbrella, no coat, just a white man in his 60s, soaked to the bone, moving with urgent desperation. The man's clothes were torn and dirty. His hair was wild, plastered to his head by the rain. He looked like he'd been living on the streets for weeks. But something was off. Jerome had seen plenty of homeless people in his 2 years of driving. They moved differently, resigned, defeated. This man moved with purpose, like he was running from something, or towards something. The stranger spotted Jerome's car and started waving frantically. His movements were sharp, commanding, like someone used to getting attention when he demanded it. Jerome hesitated. The guy clearly couldn't pay for a ride. Homeless passengers sometimes smelled bad, sometimes had mental health issues, and sometimes couldn't remember where they were going. Jerome couldn't afford a ride that didn't pay. But as the man got closer, Jerome saw his face clearly for the first time. Terror. Pure, undiluted terror. Not the defeated sadness of chronic homelessness, not the confusion of mental illness. This was the face of someone running for his life. The man reached Jerome's car and banged on the passenger window with both fists. "Please!" he shouted over the storm. "I need help!" Jerome rolled down his window an inch. Rain immediately started soaking his face. "Where are you trying to go?" "The airport, San Francisco International. I'll pay whatever you want." Jerome studied the man's face. Despite the disheveled appearance, his teeth were straight and white. His hands, though dirty, were soft, not the calloused hands of someone who'd lived rough for long. "Airport's going to be expensive in this weather," Jerome said. "Probably $60, $70 with surge pricing." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a soggy wallet. Jerome glimpsed something that made him pause. Multiple credit cards, what looked like business cards. For a homeless man, he sure carried a lot of plastic. "I don't have cash right now," the man said, his voice cracking with desperation. "But I swear to God I'll pay you when we get there. Double, triple, whatever you want." Jerome's practical side screamed warnings. Never take passengers who couldn't pay up front. Never trust promises from strangers. Never risk your only source of income in someone else's emergency. But there was something in the man's eyes. A desperation Jerome recognized from his own mirror. The look of someone who'd lost everything and was fighting for one last chance. The man checked his phone with shaking hands. The screen was cracked, but Jerome could see it was expensive. Another contradiction. "My flight leaves in 90 minutes, the man said. "If I miss it." He didn't finish the sentence, but the fear in his voice said everything. Jerome made a decision that would change everything. "Get in." The man yanked open the passenger door and collapsed into the seat, bringing the smell of rain and something else. Expensive cologne, faint but unmistakable. Another puzzle piece that didn't fit. "Thank you," the man gasped, water dripping from his hair onto Jerome's torn upholstery. "You have no idea. Thank you." Jerome cranked up the heat and pulled his spare jacket from the back seat. "Here, you're soaked." The man stared at the offered jacket like he'd never seen kindness before. "You don't have to." "Take it," Jerome said, already pulling into traffic. "Can't you catch pneumonia in my car?" As they drove through the storm, Jerome noticed more details that didn't add up. The man's watch, mostly hidden under his wet sleeve, looked expensive. His posture, despite the exhaustion, was straight-backed, authoritative. And when he gave directions to the airport, he specifically mentioned Terminal 1, the private aviation section. What kind of homeless man flew private? Jerome pushed the questions aside. Right now, a fellow human needs help. That was enough. He had no idea he was about to save the life of one of the most powerful men in California. What Jerome did next would prove that heroes come in unexpected forms. The journey to SFO normally took 45 minutes. In this storm, with flooding and accidents, it could take 2 hours. The man had 90 minutes to catch his flight. Jerome knew every shortcut in the Bay Area. He'd have to use them all. "Hold on," Jerome said, turning off the freeway onto surface streets most drivers avoided. "This is going to be a rough ride." The man gripped the door handle. Despite his desperate situation, he studied Jerome's face in the rearview mirror like he was memorizing every detail. "What's your name?" "Jerome. Jerome Washington." "Thank you, Jerome Washington. You're saving my life tonight." There was something in the way he said it. Formal, like he was used to people knowing his name without introduction. Jerome filed that away with all the other contradictions. The Honda's engine started making concerning noises as they climbed the hills toward the freeway on-ramp. Jerome had been putting off repairs for months. Now, with an important passenger and a deadline, the car decided to remind him of every deferred maintenance issue. "You okay?" the man asked, noticing Jerome's worried expression. "The engine's been acting up. Should be fine." Jerome hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. They hit the freeway, and traffic was a nightmare. Red taillights stretched endlessly ahead through the rain. Jerome checked the time, 73 minutes until the flight. He took the next exit, diving into Oakland's industrial district. Dark streets with no streetlights, flooded intersections, and potholes that could swallow a small car, but no traffic. "You know where you're going?" the man asked, not with fear, but with genuine curiosity. "Born and raised here. I know every street in Oakland." Jerome navigated around a flooded underpass. "My dad taught me these roads when I was learning to drive." "Is your dad still?" "Died 5 years ago, cancer." Jerome's voice softened. "But he'd be proud knowing his lessons are helping someone tonight." The man was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thanks. What about you, family?" The man hesitated. "It's complicated. Another non-answer that said everything and nothing. They were having a good time until the Honda started overheating on the Bay Bridge approach. Steam began rising from under the hood. No, 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 Jerome muttered, watching the temperature gauge climb into the red zone. What's wrong? The engine's overheating. In this weather, it shouldn't be. Jerome's voice trailed off as he realized the problem. The radiator had been leaking coolant for weeks. With the engine working harder in stop-and-go traffic, it finally gave up. Jerome pulled onto the shoulder. Other cars flew past, splashing dirty water across his windshield. 58 minutes to flight time. I'm sorry, Jerome said, his heart sinking. I have to let it cool down or the engine will seize. Instead of anger or frustration, the man showed genuine concern. What can I do to help? Jerome popped the hood and stepped into the rain. The man followed without hesitation, both of them getting soaked as Jerome diagnosed the problem. Radiator leak, Jerome shouted over the storm. I need to add water and pray it holds. The man watched as Jerome used his water bottle, his last water bottle, to refill the radiator. A trick his father had taught him years ago. Emergency roadside repairs with whatever you had on hand. You know cars, the man observed. When you can't afford mechanics, you learn fast. Jerome wiped his hands on his already soaked shirt. Should get us there, but we need to move. They climbed back into the car. Jerome's phone buzzed with a text from Maya's babysitter. She's asking when Daddy's coming home. I told her soon. Jerome showed the man Maya's latest drawing, stick figures of a family under a rainbow. My daughter, she's 8. I want to be a doctor. The man stared at the drawing longer than Jerome expected. She's beautiful. What's her name? Maya. She's everything to me. After her mom died, she's all I have left. Something shifted in the man's expression. Softer, more human. How long ago? 2 years. Car accident. Jerome's voice caught. Maya still asks when Mommy's coming home sometimes. The man was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, warmer. You're a good father, Jerome. Taking care of her alone, that takes real strength. Some days I don't feel very strong. The strongest people rarely do. The engine limped along as they approached SFO. 38 minutes to flight time. They might actually make it. Jerome drove straight to Terminal 1, the private aviation section. Most ride-share drivers had never been there. It was where corporate jets and charter flights departed, where people with serious money traveled. Jerome pulled up to the security checkpoint. The man started to get out, then paused. Jerome, I need you to know something. What you did tonight. Going out in this storm, helping a stranger, fixing your car with your bare hands to get me here. Most people wouldn't have done that. Most people would have done the same thing. No, the man said firmly. They wouldn't have. He reached for his wallet, water still dripping from the damaged leather. I need to pay you. More than we agreed on. Jerome waved him off. $60. That's what we said. But the extra time, the car trouble? A deal's a deal. Jerome's phone buzzed with a mobile payment notification. $60 exactly. The man tried to hand Jerome several wet business cards. Take these. If you ever need anything, I'm good. Just get to your flight safely. The man hesitated, then took one card and pressed it into Jerome's palm. Please, keep this. Jerome glanced at it. The ink was smudged from the rain, mostly illegible. He could make out un Aubert stare and Lartec, but the rest was a blur. Thank you, Jerome Washington. You saved more than just my flight tonight. Before Jerome could ask what he meant, the man was gone, walking quickly toward the private terminal. Jerome watched him disappear through security, noting how the guards seemed to recognize him despite his disheveled appearance. Jerome looked at the soggy business card again, then tucked it into his sun visor next to Maya's drawings. Some small tech company, probably. The man seemed nice enough, but Jerome had bigger problems than networking, like getting home before his car completely died. As he drove away, Jerome's phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers, probably spam. He ignored them, focused on keeping his overheating Honda running long enough to reach Maya. He had no idea that his passenger was already making phone calls. Within hours, Jerome's simple act of kindness would be national news. That the soggy business card tucked next to his daughter's artwork belonged to one of the most powerful tech executives in America. That his life was about to change forever. But what the man left behind would change everything. Jerome's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. As he drove away from the airport, call after call came through from numbers he didn't recognize. He let them go to voicemail, focused on nursing his overheating Honda through the storm back to Oakland. The engine knocked like an angry fist. Steam still rose from under the hood. Jerome had to pull over twice more to let it cool down, using rainwater from puddles to refill the radiator. Each time he stopped, his phone rang again. "Probably debt collectors," he muttered, declining another unknown call. The $60 from the airport ride brought his bank balance to $83. Enough for Maya's inhaler refill, but not enough for rent, and certainly not enough to fix his dying car. Jerome finally made it home at 4:17 a.m. The apartment complex looked even more depressing in the storm. His neighbor's TV blared through paper-thin walls. Inside, Maya's babysitter, Mrs. Carter from next door, was asleep on his couch. She watched Maya for free because she understood the struggle. Jerome gently shook her awake. "How was she?" Jerome whispered. "Good girl," asked when Daddy was coming home. Mrs. Carter gathered her things. "Jerome, your phone has been ringing all night. Professional voices, asked for you by name." Jerome walked Mrs. Carter to the door, thanking her as always. Alone, Jerome checked on Maya. She was sound asleep, clutching the stuffed rabbit that had been her mother's. On her nightstand was another drawing. Daddy helping a man in the rain. His phone buzzed again. This time, Jerome answered. "Is this Jerome Washington?" "Yeah, who's this?" "Mr. Washington, this is Rebecca Carter from Stellar Tech Industries. We need to speak with you about—" Jerome hung up. Another scam call, probably. He pulled the soggy business card from his sun visor, trying to make out the smudged text under his kitchen light. The ink had run, but he could see fragments. Robert Sturr, and CEO and Stellar Tech Industry. His phone rang again. "Mr. Washington, please don't hang up. This is regarding the passenger you drove to the airport tonight. Mr. Sterling wants to thank you personally." Jerome's hand trembled. "Sterling?" "Robert Sterling, the man you helped tonight." Jerome looked at the business card again. "Robert Sterling, CEO, Stellar Tech Industries." "I don't understand. The guy I drove looked homeless. Mr. Sterling would like to meet with you tomorrow to express his gratitude properly." Jerome's practical side kicked in. "Look, I just gave the man a ride. That's my job. He paid me what we agreed on. We're good. Mr. Washington, you saved his life tonight. He'd like to do more than just pay for the ride." "I don't need charity. This isn't charity. This is gratitude." Jerome thought about Maya's empty inhaler, the eviction notice, his dying car, his pride warred with his desperation. What kind of thank you? The kind that could change your life. Would 10 a.m. work? Jerome looked around his cramped apartment. Maya's drawings are taped to peeling walls, the couch with springs poking through worn fabric. What did he have to lose? Where? "Stellar Tech Headquarters, Oakland. I'll text you the address." After she hung up, Jerome Googled Robert Sterling Stellar Tech on his cracked phone screen. His heart stopped. The man he'd driven wasn't just rich. He was worth $2.3 billion. One of the most powerful tech executives in California, and according to the news articles, he'd been kidnapped yesterday and held for ransom. Jerome stared at the soggy business card. He'd just saved a billionaire's life, and he'd refused to take extra money for it. What Jerome didn't know was that news of his kindness had already traveled to the highest levels. Jerome woke up 3 hours later to Maya jumping on his chest. "Daddy! Daddy! Why is your phone making so much noise?" Jerome's eyes snapped open. His phone was buzzing non-stop on the coffee table. 12 missed calls, 47 text messages, all from numbers he didn't recognize. "Just spam, baby," Jerome mumbled, sitting up on the couch. His back ached from sleeping on the broken springs. Maya pointed at the TV. Mrs. Carter had left it on the local news channel. "Daddy, that man looks like someone I saw before." Jerome glanced at the screen and froze. The headline read, "Tech billionaire Robert Sterling found safe after 18-hour kidnapping." The photo showed a clean-shaven man in an expensive suit standing outside Stellar Tech headquarters. Same jawline, same eyes. But this version looked nothing like the desperate, disheveled passenger Jerome had driven through the storm. Stellar Tech Industries CEO Robert Sterling was rescued early this morning after escaping his captors. The reporter continued. Sterling, worth an estimated $2.3 billion, was reportedly held for ransom by corporate rivals attempting to steal proprietary AI technology. Jerome's phone rang again. He answered without thinking. "Mr. Washington, this is Channel 7 News. We understand you were the driver who helped Mr. Sterling reach safety. Could we get a comment?" Jerome hung up immediately. Maya tugged his shirt. "Daddy, why do people keep calling you?" Before Jerome could answer, someone knocked on their apartment door. Jerome peered through the peephole and saw a woman in an expensive suit standing in his hallway. She looked completely out of place in the rundown complex. "Mr. Washington, I'm Rebecca Carter from Stellar Tech Industries. We spoke earlier." Jerome opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. "How did you get my address?" "Your rideshare profile. Mr. Sterling is very eager to meet with you. The entire company wants to thank you for what you did." "I just gave a guy a ride?" Rebecca smiled. "Mr. Washington, you saved the life of one of Silicon Valley's most important innovators. Stellar Tech employs 12,000 people. You didn't just save Mr. Sterling, you potentially saved thousands of jobs." Jerome's head was spinning. "I don't understand. The guy looked homeless. His kidnappers dressed him that way, psychological warfare. They wanted to humiliate him before—" Rebecca's voice trailed off. "The point is, you showed kindness to someone who desperately needed it. Mr. Sterling doesn't forget acts like that." Maya peered around Jerome's legs, curious about the fancy lady. "This is Maya," Jerome said automatically. Rebecca knelt down to Maya's eye level. "Hello, Maya, your daddy is a hero." "Did you know that?" Maya beamed with pride. "My daddy helps everyone." Rebecca stood, looking directly at Jerome. "Mr. Sterling wants to help your daddy, too. Will you come to the meeting?" Jerome looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at the eviction notice still taped to his door. "What time did you say?" The truth about Robert Sterling's homeless night was about to shatter everything Jerome thought he knew. At 10 a.m. sharp, Jerome stood outside Stellar Tech Industries headquarters in downtown Oakland. The building was 40 stories of gleaming glass and steel, the kind of place Jerome had only seen in movies. Maya held his hand tightly, wearing her best dress, a hand-me-down from the church donation box that Jerome had carefully mended. They both looked completely out of place among the business suits streaming in and out of the revolving doors. "Daddy, this building touches the clouds," Maya whispered, craning her neck to see the top. Jerome's Honda sat in the visitor parking lot, steam still rising from under the hood. He'd barely made it here without breaking down completely. Rebecca Carter met them in the marble lobby. "Mr. Washington, thank you for coming. Maya, don't you look beautiful today?" The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like ascending to another world. Through the glass walls, Jerome could see Oakland spread out below, including the neighborhood where he and Maya struggled to survive. "Mr. Sterling is in the executive conference room," Rebecca said as they walked down a hallway lined with awards and patents. "He's been looking forward to this meeting all morning." She opened massive wooden doors to reveal a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay, and there, standing with his back to them, was the man Jerome had driven through the storm. But this wasn't the desperate, disheveled passenger from last night. Robert Sterling wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Jerome made in 3 months. His silver hair was immaculately styled. When he turned around, Jerome saw the same eyes, but everything else was transformed. Confident posture, expensive watch, the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful people. "Jerome," Sterling said, his voice warm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Thank you for coming." Maya hid behind Jerome's legs, suddenly shy in the presence of such obvious wealth and power. Sterling knelt down to her level just as Rebecca had done. "You must be Maya. I've heard so much about you." "You look different," Maya said with 8-year-old honesty. Sterling smiled. "I had a very difficult night yesterday, Maya. Your daddy saved me when I needed help most." He stood and gestured for Jerome to sit at the conference table. Through the windows, Jerome could see helicopters circling the building, news crews documenting Sterling's first public appearance since the kidnapping. "Jerome, I need to tell you what really happened last night," Sterling began. "What you walked into?" Jerome listened as Sterling explained the full truth. How corporate rivals had orchestrated his kidnapping to steal Stellar Tech's breakthrough AI technology. How they'd held him for 18 hours in an abandoned warehouse, interrogating him about security codes and patents. They wanted to break me psychologically, Sterling continued. Stripped me of my clothes, my dignity, dressed me like... He paused, looking at Maya. Like someone society often ignores. Jerome felt sick. They wanted you to look homeless. It was psychological warfare, make me feel powerless, worthless. They succeeded, Jerome. By the time I escaped, I believed I was nothing. Sterling walked to the window, looking out at the city below. I wandered Oakland's streets for hours in the rain. People saw me and looked away. I crossed the street to avoid me. I understood for the first time in my life what it feels like to be invisible. Jerome thought about all the times he'd seen homeless people and driven past, focused on his own problems. Then you stopped, Sterling continued. You didn't just see someone who needed a ride, you saw someone who needed help. You gave me your jacket, your water, your kindness. Maya tugged on Jerome's sleeve. Daddy always helps people. Sterling smiled at her, then looked directly at Jerome. In that car, talking about Maya and her dreams, I remembered what really matters, not the money or the power or the technology patents, the human connections, the kindness we show each other. Jerome felt overwhelmed. I just did what anyone would do. No, Sterling said firmly. I spent 18 hours learning exactly what most people do when they see someone like I appear to be. They look away. They drive past. They protect themselves first. Rebecca placed a folder on the table. Mr. Washington, the kidnappers demanded $50 million in ransom. If you hadn't helped Mr. Sterling reach his flight, they would have gotten away with the biggest corporate theft in California history. Jerome's head was spinning. Flight? I thought you were just traveling. Sterling sat back down. Emergency board meeting in New York. My investors were panicking. The stock price was crashing. If I'd missed that meeting, Stellar Tech would have collapsed. 12,000 employees would have lost their jobs. The magnitude of what Jerome had unknowingly prevented began to sink in. But here's what I want you to understand, Jerome, Sterling continued. You didn't help me because of who I am or what I'm worth. You helped me because you saw another human being in trouble. That's why this matters. Maya climbed onto Jerome's lap, sensing her daddy's emotional overwhelm. Sterling leaned forward. Jerome, I've built a billion-dollar company. I've created technology that changes lives, but last night you reminded me that the most important technology is human kindness. Jerome looked around the opulent conference room, then at his daughter in her thrift store dress, then at the soggy business card he still carried in his pocket. I still don't understand why you wanted to meet with me. Sterling smiled. Because, Jerome Washington, I want to offer you something that will change your family's life forever. But first, I want you to know you've already changed mine. Outside the conference room windows, Jerome could see news vans lining the street below, reporters preparing to tell the story of how a struggling rideshare driver had unknowingly saved a technology empire. But Jerome was about to learn that the rescue was mutual. What Robert Sterling offered next would transform not just Jerome's life, but his entire community. Sterling stood up and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting. Jerome watched, bewildered, as the billionaire pulled out an envelope and placed it on the conference table. Jerome, before we talk about the future, I want to address your immediate concerns. Jerome's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $25,000. This covers your rent, car repairs, Maya's medical expenses, and your mother-in-law's nursing home costs for the next 6 months, Sterling said matter-of-factly. Jerome stared at the check, unable to speak. Maya peered at the paper with wide eyes. Daddy, why are you crying? I can't accept this, Jerome whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. Sterling sat back down. Jerome, that check represents less than what I spend on coffee in a month. For you, it means Maya gets her medicine and you don't lose your home. Which matters more, your pride or your daughter's well-being? Jerome looked at Maya, then at the check that would solve every immediate crisis in their lives. But what do you want in return? I want to offer you a job. Rebecca opened the folder she'd brought. Director of Community Impact, Stellar Tech Industries. Starting salary, $150,000 per year. Jerome almost laughed. Mr. Sterling, I drive cars for a living. I dropped out of college after Sarah died. I don't know anything about technology or running programs. You know people, Sterling replied. You understand the struggle. You recognize the need. Those are the skills I can't teach. Sterling walked to the window overlooking Oakland. Jerome, I've been thinking about this all night. Stellar Tech has been so focused on advancing technology, we forgot about advancing people. I want to change that. He turned back to Jerome. I want to create community centers throughout Oakland. Places where people can learn coding, get job training, access mental health services, receive business mentorship, free programs that give people real opportunities. Maya tugged on Jerome's shirt. Like helping people learn new things? Exactly like that, Maya, Sterling smiled. Your daddy would design and run these programs, help families like yours discover they have more potential than they ever imagined. Jerome felt overwhelmed. Why me? You could hire someone with an MBA, someone with experience. Because MBA programs don't teach you what it's like to choose between your medicine and your child's food, Sterling said quietly. They don't teach you how to fix a car with rainwater because you can't afford a mechanic. They don't teach you how to maintain hope when everything is falling apart. Rebecca added, Mr. Sterling believes the best person to help struggling communities is someone who understands their struggles. Sterling sat back down across from Jerome. I've built a $2.3 billion company, Jerome, but last night you taught me something I'd forgotten. That success without humanity is just expensive emptiness. What would I actually do? Jerome asked, still trying to process the offer. Build bridges, Sterling said, between technology and people who've been left behind. Create programs that teach coding to single mothers. Provide job training for former addicts. Offer business loans to entrepreneurs who banks won't touch. Sterling pulled up presentations on the conference room screen. Stellar Tech will fund 5 community centers initially, $50 million investment over 3 years. You'd hire and train staff, develop curricula, measure impact. Jerome looked at the plans. Modern buildings with computer labs, classrooms, childcare facilities, even small medical clinics. The first center opens in your neighborhood, Sterling continued. Walking distance from your apartment. Because transformation should start where it's needed most. Maya climbed onto Jerome's chair to see the pictures better. Daddy, it looks like a school for grown-ups. That's exactly what it is, Maya, Sterling said. A place where your neighbors can learn new skills and change their lives. Rebecca handed Jerome another document. Complete benefits package. Health insurance for you and Maya, life insurance, stock options that could be worth millions if Stellar Tech continues growing. Jerome scanned the benefits list. Maya's asthma treatments would be fully covered, his diabetes medication, even dental care they'd never been able to afford. There's one more thing, Sterling said, his voice softer. Maya's education fund. He handed Jerome another envelope. Inside was documentation for a $500,000 trust fund. Full scholarship through medical school if that's still her dream. Maya looked confused by all the papers, but Jerome's tears told her something amazing was happening. Mr. Sterling, this is too much. I gave you a $60 ride. No, Jerome. You gave me perspective worth billions. Sterling leaned forward. When I was being held captive, I thought about my legacy. Buildings with my name on them, patents that made me rich, technology that impressed other billionaires. He paused, looking at Maya. But in your car, talking about Maya's dreams, I realized real legacy isn't what you build for yourself. It's what you build for others. Jerome thought about Sarah, about the dreams they'd shared for their family's future, about Maya's drawing of herself as a doctor, about the father he wanted to be. When would I start? Sterling smiled. Monday. But first we're getting you a new car. Can't have Stellar Tech's Director of Community Impact driving a Honda that breaks down every few miles. Rebecca added, Tesla Model S company car. Fully electric, perfect for Oakland's new environmental initiatives. Jerome looked at Maya, who was now coloring on the back of one of the documents with a crayon Sterling had given her. She was drawing their family, but this time, instead of stick figures struggling in the rain, she'd drawn them standing in front of a big building with lots of other happy families. My daughter has always been smarter than me, Jerome said, his voice thick with emotion. Sterling extended his hand. Welcome to Stellar Tech, Jerome. Let's change some lives. As they shook hands, Jerome realized the rescue truly had been mutual. Sterling had saved him from poverty and despair, but Jerome had saved Sterling from something worse, forgetting his humanity. Outside the conference room windows, Jerome could see his old neighborhood in the distance. Soon it would look very different. 6 months later, the ripples of that rainy night had become waves of change. The first Stellar Tech Community Center opened on a sunny Tuesday morning in East Oakland. Jerome stood in front of the gleaming new building wearing his first business suit, watching a line of neighbors stretch around the block. The same corner where he used to sit in his broken Honda, praying for one more fare, now housed a $10 million facility with computer labs, job training classrooms, and free childcare. Maya, now 9 and thriving in private school, cut the ribbon alongside Jerome and Sterling. Local news cameras captured the moment, but Jerome's eyes were on the faces in the crowd, his neighbors finally seeing hope. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 3 months, 347 adults enrolled in various programs. Single mothers learned coding while their children attended free preschool. Former addicts built websites for local businesses. Elderly residents took computer classes taught by neighborhood teenagers. Tyrone Williams, 19, had been dealing drugs on this corner. Jerome recruited him personally, seeing potential beneath the tough exterior. 6 months later, Tyrone landed an $85,000 programming job. He moved his grandmother out of public housing with his first paycheck. "Mr. Jerome saw something in me I didn't see in myself," Tyrone told reporters. "Code beats corners every time." Diana Rodriguez, a single mother of 3, completed cybersecurity certification while working 2 jobs. Stellar Tech hired her at $95,000 annually, more than she'd made in 3 previous years combined. "I used to cry myself to sleep worrying about rent," Diana said. "Now I'm saving for college funds." The center's job placement rate hit 89%. Oakland's mayor visited monthly, bringing delegations from other cities wanting to replicate the model. Sterling expanded as promised. By month 8, centers were under construction in West Oakland, East San Jose, and Richmond. Each hired locally, creating dozens of jobs for community members. Jerome's transformation was equally dramatic. The exhausted father who collapsed on a broken couch had become a confident executive. He presented to Stellar Tech's board, spoke at national conferences, and graced Oakland Magazine's cover as Visionary of the Year. Jerome started dating Angela Martinez, Maya's teacher. Maya adored Angela, especially during science fair projects about medical technology. They moved to a safe 3-bedroom house, but Jerome kept his office at the original center. "I never want to forget where I came from," he told Sterling. Maya's grandmother Helen thrived in private care, her Alzheimer's progression slowing with better treatment. Maya visited every Sunday, reading stories and showing honor roll certificates. National media attention grew. Jerome's story inspired similar programs in Detroit, Atlanta, and Phoenix. Silicon Valley companies adopted Stellar Tech's model as their blueprint for community impact. Sterling regularly joined center visits, helping with computer classes and business mentoring. The billionaire CEO became a familiar sight in East Oakland, earning genuine respect from initially suspicious residents. "Robert Sterling could write checks from his mansion," said Maria Gonzalez, a center graduate who now ran her own catering business. "Instead, he shows up weekly to help my daughter with math homework. That's a real change." The centers transformed Oakland's economy. Local businesses hired graduates. Property values rose as families invested in communities instead of fleeing. Crime rates dropped 23% within 2 miles of centers. Jerome's old rideshare passengers recognized him around town. "Remember when you helped my grandmother with groceries?" they'd say. "Look at you now, changing the whole neighborhood." Numbers told part of the story. The real transformation was in daily faces. The single mother who stopped crying herself to sleep, the teenager who chose college over dealing drugs, the elderly man learning to video call grandchildren. By year's end, Jerome had hired 12 former rideshare drivers as community liaisons. They understood struggle, recognized potential, and built bridges between neighborhoods and opportunities. "We're not just teaching skills," Jerome told tech executives studying Stellar Tech's model. "We're proving everyone deserves a chance to rewrite their story." The same corner where Jerome once sat in desperation, counting dollars and praying for hope, now sent dozens of families toward brighter futures every single day. But the most important transformation was still to come. 1 year later, on another rainy October night, Jerome drove Maya home from her science fair. She'd won first place with a project on AI applications in emergency medicine, inspired by her dream of becoming a doctor. As they passed the same corner where everything had changed, Jerome pulled over. Through the rain, he saw a homeless veteran sitting in a doorway, shivering and alone. "Daddy?" Maya asked, recognizing the look in her father's eyes. Jerome smiled. "Want to help someone?" They bought the man hot food from a nearby restaurant. Jerome handed him a Stellar Tech Community Center card along with the meal. "Free job training and veteran support services," Jerome explained. "Just show up Monday morning." The man studied the card. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone helped me once when I needed it most," Jerome said. "That's how kindness works. It keeps moving forward." 3 months later, Marcus Thompson was working security at Stellar Tech headquarters and volunteering at the veteran support program Jerome had created. Maya, now 10, understood the lesson completely. Every Sunday after visiting Grandma Helen, she and Jerome would walk through their old neighborhood looking for ways to help, sometimes carrying groceries for elderly neighbors, other times connecting people with life-changing resources. Sterling joined their family for dinner every Sunday. Maya called him Uncle Robert, and he'd helped her build a small laboratory in their basement where she conducted experiments and dreamed of medical school. "Your daddy changed my life," Sterling often told Maya, "and you both remind me what really matters." The Stellar Tech Community Impact Program had grown to 12 centers across California, with plans for nationwide expansion. Jerome's model was studied at Harvard Business School and replicated worldwide. But for Jerome, the real success was simpler. Maya had grown into a confident, compassionate girl who excelled in school and understood that helping others was the most important work anyone could do. She kept Sarah's photo on her desk next to her acceptance letter to a prestigious STEM summer program. "Mama, Daddy kept your kindness alive," Maya whispered to the photo each night. "And I'm going to be a doctor who helps everyone, just like you wanted." Jerome often watched his daughter, remembering the desperate father who'd almost given up hope on that stormy night. Sarah's old Honda had been donated to another single parent through the community center, the same spirit of helping continuing to new families. On Jerome's office wall hung 2 framed items, the soggy business card that started everything and Maya's original drawing labeled "World's Best Daddy." Both were priceless reminders that small acts of kindness create the biggest miracles. Every morning, Jerome looked at those frames and remembered Sarah's favorite saying, "Kindness is free, but its value is priceless." The ripples from one rainy night continued spreading, touching more lives every day. This story proves that ordinary moments can create extraordinary change. Jerome's story started with one simple choice: help a stranger in need. That choice created ripples that transformed hundreds of lives, built community programs, and proved that kindness is the most powerful force for change. Every day we face Jerome's choice. The person who needs help might not be a billionaire, but they're someone's child, parent, hope. Your small act of kindness could be the moment that changes everything. What if we all became like Jerome? What if every community had people willing to help strangers in the rain? The transformation would be unstoppable. Here's my challenge for you. Be someone's Jerome this week. Help without expecting anything back. You never know whose life you might save, or how it might change your own. Share this story if it touched your heart, like if you believe in the power of human goodness. Subscribe to Black Soul Stories for more stories that prove ordinary people create extraordinary miracles, because sometimes helping one person can save an entire community.